Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. I'm going to be doing some figure work today, and I'm going to be using a website called quickposes.com, which some of you might be aware of. It's a useful reference for just practicing figure work, so not necessarily completing kind of your own artwork exactly, but for just practicing working from the figure, or if you want to develop the ability to kind of work from your imagination. It's a useful resource because it's always good to kind of work with a combination of your imagination and an understanding of kind of real naturalistic forms that the human figure might take. So the way it works is I'm going to add a link to this on the video and also in the post on our OCAD page and the blog. For you guys to take a look, but basically there's various different types of approaches to it, so you can choose different types of photos, so it even works with animals, landscapes, hands, feet as specific parts of the figure, and then it also has a choice to do male or female, and you can do nude or partially nude or clothed and costumed. And then you select intervals. So I'm going to be working with 120 seconds, which I think is the longest that they allow, but they do 30 seconds as well. I just want to be able to explain what I'm doing as I work. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you my screen, but you guys can take a look and try it out yourself. But basically, I just get, for like 120 seconds, the way that I've set it up, I'll just get a reference of a figure, which I'll then try to draw a gesture of. I'm going to go through how you create the gestures. But as I say, you can do shorter than that, you can do longer, so you could do 90 seconds, 60, 45, 30 seconds, if you prefer, and then you choose to draw 10, 20, 30, 40 images at any given time. So yeah, it's really good. You can kind of, if you did 10 images, 30 seconds, it's only, 300 seconds, 5 minutes or something like that you'd spend. So doing 10, 120 seconds, I'm going to spend about 20 minutes or so on this, which is our normal kind of lesson time. So I'll get started. Just adjust my camera there a bit. Depending on whether you like the image or not, you can skip it. But generally, when I start if I'm starting a quick figure pose like this, I want to try to figure out where the head goes. Actually, I'm just going to add a little bit more tape to my bottom of my sheet. And you can work as large or as small as you like. I'm going to be working moderately small just to fit a few more onto the page. So I start with getting my head in place. And as always, we like to keep our heads nice and simple. Then underneath the head, look for the angle of the shoulders. This is quite a strange pose because it's underwater, so there's no, usually you'd have a kind of a sense of weight to the figure, so I would immediately go to the bottom and figure out where the weight in the feet would go. But what I might do is just measure for the bottom, roughly where the bottom goes. Look for how far out. It's kind of like a sort of floating female figure in water, this one. So just put a little suggestion of her foot there. Then look for between those 2 points roughly where the hips go and what angle they're at. So they're sort of kind of straightish, the hips. And then there's, if we move to the back, we've got a bit of a curve coming down from the back that way. Then curve this way. Oh, that one skipped actually, so I'll move on to the next one. So I'm possibly a little bit too precise working at it, but you get the idea. So I'll try to do this one a bit quicker. So block in, same as we did last time, block in the head. This is a figure kind of leaning against a wall. So then we've got a curved back and shoulders, an arm that swings down, wraps up, and then another arm that's kind of like up, resting on a wall, and they're kind of somewhat hidden in shadow. Then the legs, stick out like this. And it's got a strong tilt back with the legs. And then we generally look for a forward curve for the thighs, and then a reverse curve for the lower legs. And just really simply block in these feet. So you do get kind of sometimes slightly unusual poses, not usually your standard sort of pose. So I've got, drop down here, I've got a male pose now. So again, start with the head. Block that in as simply as possible. Then got top of his shoulders. He's in a pretty dynamic pose. So torso's kind of stretching this way. As much as possible, I try to keep the curves in the torso parallel. So he's got some sort of shorts on. And then thighs bending that way, and this way he's in a kind of like archer pose almost. Block in the knee. And then again, just trying to keep it as simple as possible. This leg reaches out a bit differently. Then this arm in. So again, looking for these parallel curves with the arms. So the upper arm and the lower arm kind of curve similarly. Then this one kind of like rounds out over the top, drops down. It's kind of like in a sort of fish shape, so the fist, because of foreshortening, sort of blocks out the rest of that arm. So as you go in and kind of correct or add detail to that figure, it would start to make a bit more sense of what's going on. So you'll find like I feel like there are some issues with the proportions in that, but generally it's not too bad. So we've now got a kind of crouched over figure, quite a classical pose, this one. So the head's somewhat blocked off by the rest of the form. So with this one I'm going to draw kind of a negative shape. This is the back of the neck going up to the head, and then the torso is kind of wrapped around. This way. Then we got the top of the hands kind of wrapped over the heads, or head, like that. Another curve for the lower part of the torso, is a kind of quite strong crumple in. Then a curve for the thigh, as always, kind of looking for these fairly sort of simplified, bold curves, just because it makes it manageable. If you try to add make it kind of too complex, you just won't be able to get it down in time. This is sort of viewed totally in profile. So I managed to get that one blocked in a little bit quicker, which is good. If I had time, it means I've got a little bit more of an opportunity to correct some shapes. So I look at the figure, maybe look for some of the internal muscles, or start thinking about how that works. Some little bit more details. Pop an ear in because it makes it clear that's the head tucked in. Think about the structure of the shoulder, how that kind of connects to this arm as well as the neck. Just skipping through looking for some of the poses are a bit crazy. There's a bit more of a classical one. Let's work down here. So again, box in the head. This is the first one I've had, which is a bit more of a kind of traditional contrapostura pose. So shoulders are tilting that way, the hips are tilting this way. So I'm just kind of thinking about the distance between the shoulders and hips, and then roughly where the feet are relative to that. So this back foot is bearing a lot of weight just there, and then there's a forefoot that's sticking out here. So I'm going to quickly just block them in. Underneath the head. So where the feet lie underneath the head is essentially kind of the sense of balance in the piece. So if the head was too far back, at this point it would start to feel unbalanced, like there isn't the right amount of weight. So we can then look for these curving the torso down to the hips. So that's the point in our hip, this hip that bends out. Again, just looking for those curves. It's all just gestural work. It's not looking for specific muscles just yet. If you can capture them with the gesture, that's good. But it's not crucial. So this one's a bit more straight on this leg. Then we've got our shoulder up there, which is in a fairly relaxed pose, dropping down to the thigh, kind of blocked in over this thigh, and then this back arm is in a kind of tucked up pose like this. So that's it for that one. I'm just going to swap my paper and lift these bits of tape off. I've run out of space. I don't want to drop the paste too much, so get it up as quickly as possible. This is another quite interesting seated pose. So we'll go again for the head. I pretty much always like to start with the head. It gives me a nice little anchor point. I use that to look for horizontal alignment. So if I drop down in this pose, the corner of his bum, which is kind of resting on the seat, sits just about underneath that right hand side of the head. Then shoulder there, a shoulder here, arm that kind of swings down. You also find, you probably see I've got a bit more kind of fluid with my drawing, so if you really get into it, you spend some time working on these, you'll find it gets a lot more comfortable after a while to do. You sort of zone out a bit and don't think too much about anything in particular. You just get really into the kind of flow of copying these drawings. And they're very, because they're so quick, you don't really get too precious with them, which is nice as well. So we've got that right hand arm there. There's this kind of line going up the back. Yeah, so the head blocks in just here. I'm trying to get this arm wraps around, kind of lightly grasping. Then got the curve in this leg, and then a curve back where it's sort of tucked under. And then the foot's in a somewhat awkward pose, this one. You sometimes get that with these sorts of seated poses. So this approach works, also works for if you're going to life drawing classes. You'll tend to get a lot of these quick poses. That's it for that one. There's a few that have clothing, so I'm going to skip through those. So we've got another figure here. So just block in approximate version of the head, maybe block in the hair as well. And we've got a tilt for the shoulders, and then again it's got a contrappostura, so hips tilt back up, drop down to about here for the feet. So one foot's in this sort of pose. I usually try to keep the feet to about 3 lines. Where possible, sometimes they're in more awkward shapes, but I don't like the feet to get too complex. The best way to think about it is that as though the foot is wearing a sock basically over it, so don't think too much about the toes. So from there we've got legs curving. So one's curving in this way, just kind of wrapping slightly over the other one that's tucked behind there, then kind of straight up, comes to quite a sharp point. Back out. So I think I have too much longer left, so I'm trying to get this one in as quickly as possible. That one comes to there. Got neck drops down. It's probably gone a little bit too small with these. These legs relative to the top of the body, but roughly fit in there. So what I'd probably do, correcting this one, I think I'm going to run out of time, but I would just extend the legs. So let's see if we can get one more done. Try to find a good pose for the final one. Well, hopefully you guys get the idea. So you're basically just working quickly through whichever of the poses is interesting or work well that you find. And the main thing is, if you're kind of forcing yourself to work at speed, you stop thinking too much about what you're doing, and you get really focused on the subject, which is good. There you go, got one final one where a guy's holding a prop. So we'll try to do that as quickly as possible. So we've got shoulders tilting up, fairly kind of blocky physique, this guy, down and towards the hips. From there, got one thigh going out this way, kind of towards us. Another one that's similar sort of angle, but going backwards. It's quite a lot of foreshortening in this reference. You'll find that a bit sometimes, but it's no big problem. Then got that foot sticking out that way. This foot's coming this way. Then I'm going to angle back here. A little bit more that way. Got our elbow tilting back. Back arm, you just see the forearm. It's resting over this bar which is moving. I think it's like a baseball bat he's holding just behind his head. pretty much like that. So something like that would be totally sufficient. It's probably the quickest one I managed to get done, but I've captured everything I want to capture in the pose. It's all pretty well in proportion, it matches the foreshortening, so that's what you're after. But yeah, hopefully that's a good introduction to gesture work for you. I might do some slightly more detailed gestures next week, how we might develop them, and have some references up on screen for you to look at as well. But yeah, I'll put the link to this site for you to have a look at, and hopefully you can have a go yourself and see if you can get pretty quick with your poses. Try to make them faster and faster and see how fast you can get. But yeah, that's it for this week. As always, follow our YouTube and check out the OCAD Studio page for signing up, so you can get some tuition from myself and a bunch of other tutors. But yeah, that's it, and I'll see you guys soon.